I think we just have the ability in the business model to basically build in the most advanced models in the world and offer it to everyone for free. A lot of what we're focused on is giving every creator and every small business the ability to create AI agents for themselves. I think every business is going to have an AI agent that their customers can talk to in the future. I actually think that open source is going to end up being the safer and more secure way to develop AI. One is that in order for this all to work, the US has to have an advantage in the first place, or the West, and kind of our advantage is basically open and decentralized innovation. A realistic aim that we should hope for is that we use open source to basically develop the leading and most robust ecosystem in the world.
Well, he did it. There's some speculation that Mark Zuckerberg was not going to open source the next big model, so they're rolling it out as Llama 3.1. That includes the 405 billion parameter model. There's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of very interesting things that are happening because this release and what it means for the world is much bigger than this model itself. We'll go over the benchmarks, but it's important to understand that this model is as good as the frontier models. It's as good as the best models out there, and it's open source. So that's point number one. It's very good. Point number two, there's a lot of things happening here with synthetic data. They're working with the developer community, the open source community, and they're asking for feedback on how they can help them, you, I, us, how they can help give us the tools for fine-tuning our own AI models, for using Llama, this model, for synthetic data generation, for the purpose, and I'll spell it out, to train other models. We've seen tons of research showing that if you're able to take the outputs of one big smart model, you can create your very own AI models that are highly effective, very smart, very capable at the level of that big model, or better, perhaps, but for your own specific use cases. Orca 2, for example, was as good or better as models 10 times their size. And they are very explicitly, very clearly saying that it's cool. You can go for it. You can build your own models. You can use this Llama model to generate the synthetic data for your own model to get trained on. And it's totally cool. You got this. What this means is that you can create your own models, spin off various like agents for your own use cases, use something like Grok, the chip, to run inference at like insane lightning speeds. It's hard to even fathom what that means, really, but there's a great interview with Mark Zuckerberg that just came out at the same time as the release of the model, where he talks about some potential outcomes of this. So we've heard Sam Altman mention that we're not that far, perhaps, from seeing a $1 billion company that's run, for example, with just one person and a number of AI agents. Mark just said something very similar in that just like most businesses will now use a computer, right? Because that was not the case 10, 20, 30 years ago, right? It slowly went from 0 to, near 100%, I would assume. Well, it seems like he's saying that the same thing will happen with AI agents. Just like right now, everyone uses a computer. Very soon, every person, every business will have their own fleet, their own swarm of AI agents. Take a listen.
My goal was for it to be the most used AI assistant in the world by the end of the year. I think we're well on track for that. We'll probably hit that milestone, a few months before the end of the year. And look, on that, I think we just have the ability in the business model to basically build in the most advanced models in the world and offer it to everyone for free. So I think that's a kind of a huge advantage. It's really easy to use from all of our apps. So I'm pretty excited about how that's going. So we have the basic assistant, and I think that's going to be a big deal. But even more than that, a lot of what we're focused on is giving every creator and every small business the ability to create AI agents for themselves, making it so that every person on our platforms can create their own AI agents that they want to interact with. And if you think about it, these are just huge spaces, right? So there are hundreds of millions of small businesses in the world. And one of the things I think is really important is basically making it so with a relatively small amount of work, a business can basically, a few taps, stand up an AI agent for themselves that can do customer support, sales, communicate with all their people, all their customers. I kind of think that every business in the future, just like they have an email address and a website and a social media presence today, I think every business is going to have an AI agent that their customers can talk to in the future. And we want to enable that for all of those. So it's going to be hundreds of millions, maybe billions of kind of small business agents.
Now, you might be looking at that channel saying 700 subscribers on his YouTube channel. Why is such a small YouTube channel talking to Mark Zuckerberg on the day of release of this massive model? We talked about Rowan Chang on this channel before. So he runs the Rundown AI. So that's a newsletter that's been building for quite some time. I believe we started talking about AI right around the same time. He's absolutely crushing it in the email space. And now he's in the YouTube space talking with Mark Zuckerberg. This guy is a machine. So Rowan, phenomenal job. Very, 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 I'm going to say motivating. Okay. It's very motivating for me to see you just killing it. But in that interview, Rowan and Mark Zuckerberg, they chat. And here's my big takeaway from this whole thing. And this is important, I think, because it's really going to be shaping where the whole AI field is going. And in a way, maybe where the world is going as well, depending on how this thing unfolds. We are standing at a bit of a crossroads, right? We've covered a lot of stuff on this channel that shows that there's a lot of powerful forces, a lot of influential people that are all in disagreement about how to treat AI. Do we pull it into more of a free market like the big tech and the tech startups, Silicon Valley develop it? Some people want it more under the government's wing. And some people want open source to win, to have these models be freely available for everyone in the world, for everyone to benefit from the automation, from the power of AI. When I saw Mark Zuckerberg back in the days going into that metaverse and augmented reality and stuff like that, it seemed like he was looking for a mission. He was looking for a quest, something to just pour himself into. He was looking for that next big thing to go after. But it seemed like he was a bit early because just a few years later, I think, after that whole thing is where AI started showing up. And now it's here. And now he's specifically going all in on open source AI. And I gotta say, listening to him speak, a lot of the stuff seems to make sense. To me, at least. You might disagree. If you do, put in the comments. I want to know. But he is presenting a very strong case for why open source AI could be better for the world, for developers, and in fact, for safety. But let's take a look at a few clips from Rowan Chang's interview with Mark Zuckerberg on Rowan's channel. I'll leave the link to Rowan's channel below if you want to see the full thing. Ask yourself this: does it feel like he's trying to sell you something, or does it feel like this is the new thing that he will obsessively, compulsively pursue to try to make it a reality? Does it seem like he believes in it? Yeah, sure, he's going to make a bunch of money doing it, but doesn't feel like he's really into it. Take a listen.
So I think that this moment with Llama 3.1 is kind of like that inflection point where I think Llama has the opportunity to become the open source AI standard, for open source to become the standard, the industry standard for AI. And even in the places where it's not yet ahead on performance, it leads on kind of cost and on customizability and on the ability to take the model and fine tune it and do all the things that you want with it. So I think that those are just huge advantages that we're going to see developers take. And we're focusing on building out this partner ecosystem, and there are going to be all these different capabilities that get built out around it. Well, the thing that I'm most excited about is seeing people use it to distill and fine-tune their own models, right? It's, I mean, like you're saying, this is the first open source frontier level model, but it's not the first frontier level model. So there have been other models that sort of have that capacity. And yeah, people are going to want to do inference directly on the 405 because it's, by our estimates, it's going to be about 50% cheaper, I think, than GPT-4o to do that directly. And so I think that obviously makes a difference to a lot of people. But the thing that I think is really new in the world with this is because it's open weights, the ability to take the model and distill it down to whatever size that you want, to use it for synthetic data generation, to use it as a teacher model. So our vision for the future, it's not just, it was never that there's going to be one singular thing. I think this is like OpenAI sort of has this vision that they're going to build kind of one big AI. Anthropic does too, Google does too. It's never been our vision. Our vision is that there should be lots of different models. I think every startup out there, every enterprise, governments, they all kind of want to have their own custom models. And yeah, when the closed ecosystem was so much better than open source, it was just better to take the vanilla closed thing off the shelf, because even though you could customize open source, there was still some gap between the performance that you could get. But now we don't see that anymore. Right now, as open source basically closes the gap, I think you're just going to see this wide proliferation of models where people now have the incentive to basically customize and build and train exactly the right size model for what they're doing, train their data into it. They're going to have the tools to do it because of a lot of the partner integrations that the companies like Amazon are doing with AWS or Databricks, or different folks like that who are building these whole suites of services for distilling and fine-tuning open models. So we built it for ourselves. And before Llama 3.1, we kind of had this instinct that if we made it open source, there would be a community that would grow around it, and that would actually extend the capabilities and make it more valuable for everyone, including us. We're not a public cloud provider, right? We're not AWS or Google or Azure, right? So developers aren't going to come to us to build their stuff, but we want to make sure that all those public clouds are well equipped to do this. That goes for some of the more basic functionality, like just hosting the models and serving inference. At the same time, I think that there are also going to be folks like Grok, right, who are doing really interesting work on really kind of ultra low latency inference, and I'm really excited to get this in their hands. And they're building something for launch that basically is is gonna enable that too. And then there's this whole set of enterprise companies. So folks like Dell or Scale.ai or Deloitte or Accenture who work with all the enterprises around the world on technology deployments. I think those are gonna be a lot of the folks who help build kind of custom models for whether they're large enterprises or governments. A lot of folks who basically want to have a model that's their model, but they can train their custom data into it. But they a lot of companies don't want to send their data over an API to Google or OpenAI. And not because those companies have any particular privacy issue, but it's the same reason why people like encryption in WhatsApp, right? People just want kind of secure by design architectures where their data can kind of stay with them.
Can you talk more about like what the broad societal implications are of open source AI?
Yeah, I mean, my view is that open source is a really important ingredient to having a positive AI future. And that there are all these awesome things that AI is going to bring in terms of productivity gains and creativity enhancements for people, and hopefully it'll help us with research and things like that. But I think open source is an important part of how we make sure that this benefits everyone and is accessible to everyone. It isn't something that's just locked into a handful of big companies. At the same time, I actually think that open source is going to end up being the safer and more secure way to develop AI. I know that there's sort of a debate today about, is open source safe? And I actually take the different position on it. It's not only do I think it's safe, I think it's safer than the alternative of closed development. And I sort of break it down into, there are lots of different kinds of harm. So you can't just talk about one type of thing. But on this, I think that there's unintentional harms. So the system goes off the rails in some way that people didn't intend. And then there's intentional harms where you have like some bad actors trying to use the system to do something bad. When it comes to unintentional harms, which I think, by the way, it's worth noting that like most of the sci-fi scenarios that people worry about of AI just going rogue are kind of unintentional. I actually think that open source should be safer on that because it will have more scrutiny, it'll have more transparency. And I think all the developers who use it, and one of the questions that you sometimes hear debated is like, okay, if you're open sourcing the really advanced models, how do you make it so that it doesn't get to China or they're not gonna use that against us? And that's sometimes an argument that people have for, hey, you should lock down development. But I think that's sort of missing a few things. One is that in order for this all to work, the US has to have an advantage in the first place, or the West, and kind of our advantage is basically open and decentralized innovation, where it's not just a small number of big companies or labs, it's startups and universities and individuals hacking on things or even parts of companies, and that's a big part of it, and you don't want to shut that down. So I think if you do, you increase the chance that we don't even lead in the first place. But then I think you get to the issue, which is, okay, like China, or not even China, any government, there are all the risks of kind of stealing models and espionage. I mean, a lot of the models fit on a hard drive that you can quickly put in your backpack or whatever. And it's I just think we need to be realistic about how likely it is that we can secure, and not us, but like any of the tech companies can secure any of these models long term. It's very sophisticated efforts to do that. So my own fear is that if we lock down development, we end up in a world where basically you have a small number of companies plus all the adversaries who can steal the model are the only ones who have access, but all the startups, all the universities, all the individual hackers are kind of just left out and don't have the ability to do this. So my own view is that a realistic aim that we should hope for is that we use open source to basically develop the leading and most robust ecosystem in the world, in that we have an expectation that our companies work closely with our government and allied governments on national security, so that way our governments can persistently just be integrating the latest technology and have a, whatever it is, a 6-month advantage, 8-month advantage on our adversaries. And I think that's, I don't know that in this world you get a 10-year permanent advantage, but I think a kind of perpetual lead actually will make us more safe in one where we're leading than the model that others are advocating, which is, okay, you have a small number of closed labs, they lock down development, we probably risk being the lead at all, like probably the other governments are getting access to it. That's my view. I actually think on both these things, spreading prosperity for more evenly around the world, making it so that there can be more progress, and on safety, I think we're basically just going to find over time that open source leads. So I think that AI has more potential than any other single technology that's being developed right now to increase productivity, accelerate the economy, make it so that kind of every person has the ability to be more creative and produce more interesting things. But there are a lot of countries that aren't going to have the ability to do that because, I mean, pretty soon things are going to cost many billions of dollars to train. And I think that having the ability for different countries and entrepreneurs in different countries and businesses to use it to serve people better and just do better work is going to be something that basically like lifts all boats around the world and just has a massive kind of equalizing effect. So I think that's really positive. And that's one of the places where we get the most thanks for this is not actually the tech community, but it's like different developing countries or other countries that want to have access to the technology and do stuff with it. But wouldn't necessarily have the tech field themselves to produce something that is state-of-the-art that their business can build on top of.
I was a little shocked by how directly you called out Apple and their closed approach. Can you kind of expand on that and where Apple has been a blocker for Meta and potentially others?
Yeah, I mean, my point in there is it's a little more philosophical on how it's affected my own kind of approach towards things and psychologically sort of affected how I think about building stuff. I actually don't know how they're going to approach AI. They do some open development, they do some closed development. By the way, I think it's worth noting, like, I don't actually consider myself to be an open source zealot. I just think that in this case, I think that open models are going to be the standard. I think that that's going to be good for the world. But we do open development, we do closed development, so I get it, right? And I'm not saying that Apple's necessarily going to be in the wrong place on this for AI. But if you look back over the last 10 or 15 years, it has been a formative experience for us, is building our services on top of platforms that are controlled by our competitors. And for a number of different incentives, they absolutely, from my perspective, apply different rules to kind of limit what we can do. And I think it's a little bit soul crushing when you go build features that are what you believe is good for your community, and then you're told that you can't ship them because some company wants to put you in a box so that they can better compete with you. And my concern for AI at this point isn't actually Apple. It's more the other companies and how that would evolve. And I think to some degree, it's not even that. I'm not even saying that they're like bad people. I think that there's just a physics and incentive structure to the system where, if you build a closed system, then eventually there are all these forces on you that sort of kind of push you to kind of clamp down on things. And I think that it will be a healthier ecosystem if it's developed more like the web, but more capable. Yeah, probably a little early to talk about Llama 4, but it is gonna be awesome. And it has been one of the interesting things in running the company is basically planning out the compute clusters and data trajectories for not just Llama 4, but the next probably 4 or 5 versions of Llama, because these are long lead time investments to build out these data centers and the power around them and the chip architectures and the networking architectures.
Do you think we're kind of at that early stage and there'll be a point where anti-AI sentiment will be viewed similar to the internet today? And what kind of factors do you think will be crucial in changing that perspective?
I think there are different ways that people can be worried about something. I mean, financially, one thing that I'm quite aware of is the internet had a big bubble burst before it succeeded. And yes, all the people who were very long on the internet were eventually right, but sometimes things take a little longer to develop than you think, and you just need to have the commitment to see that through. And that's something that I'm aware of because, yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about all the unlocks that we're gonna get from Llama 3 and then Llama 4 and then Llama 5, and I think that's gonna translate to better products. But realistically, it's hard to know in advance when something is good enough that you're gonna have a product that billions of people use, and then when it's ready to kind of be a large business. And I mean, look, we're all spending a lot of capital and on basically training these models. So I think that people are gonna be probably losing money for quite a while. Maybe that'll all happen quicker. It's hard to know exactly. The other part of this that I think you are more getting at is people's concern about what it means for their livelihoods. And on that, this is one of the reasons why I think the open source approach, the approach of lots of different models out there that are kind of personalized and customized to every business and every creator and every person, I think that's important, because if this develops in a way where it's just a small number of companies that build the products and benefit, and people use the products, and maybe they like talking to an AI assistant, and that's valuable for them. But if this doesn't in some way help lift all boats, then I think you end up eventually getting a backlash. And part of what I've spent some time thinking about after just looking at how the kind of Web 2.0 stuff developed is, in the next generation of technologies around AI, around AR and VR, how do we create not just a kind of thriving set of products and kind of economic kind of productivity gains, but how do we have like a better and more sustainable political economy around it, where there's just way more people who feel like they're kind of bought in or benefiting from this and supportive of the system. And I thought we did that reasonably well with social media, but I just looking at some of the feedback and some of the response from the world, I think that it's going to be important to do that even better with AI and some of the new technologies in order to mitigate some of the concerns that people are going to have about what this is going to mean for their livelihoods and jobs and their lives.
So here's the letter that Mark wrote that was released today with the release of Llama 3.1. Titled Open Source AI is the Path Forward. He talks quite a bit about other open source platforms and software, but here are a few bullet points that really jump out at me. So this is why open source AI is good for developers. Oftentimes when you have a lot of developers supporting a certain platform, whether it's game developers for a certain platform or software developers for those platforms, those communities, they tend to win, they tend to grow. It's this virtuous cycle, the flywheel effect, right? It gets bigger and bigger. The bigger it gets, the more users and other developers it attracts, the more money it attracts. It just keeps snowballing. That was, if you recall, the leaked memo out of Google in the days of your May 04, 2023, that kind of predicted a lot of this very, very early. It's titled, We Have No Moat, and neither does OpenAI. They're saying in this AI race, neither OpenAI nor Google will be the winner. There's another faction, a third faction that has been quietly eating their lunch. And they were talking, of course, about open source. Things that were considered major hard problems to solve were rapidly solved when this open source AI models were put into the hands of the world, the open source community. They're saying while our models still hold a slight edge in terms of quality, the gap is closing astonishingly quickly. Open source models are faster, more customizable, more private, and pound for pound more capable. There's no secret sauce, and giant models are slowing us down. And if back in the day it was we have no moat, this is more like the castle is sacked. Because as more and more people start building on top of this, of using it, of learning how to use the tech stack that I think they're calling it the Llama stack. So just like you have developers developing on certain languages or on certain platforms, they've created the Llama stack on top of which all of this AI stuff will be built, and they got the snowball rolling. And so why is open source AI models, why is that good for the developers, for the builders? Well, they need to train, fine tune, and distill their own models. It's simple. Everybody needs their own custom models for custom use cases. You might need one that's on device. You might have something very complicated that requires larger models. And of course, you don't want people seeing your data. You don't want to get locked into a closed vendor. And this is not about criticizing Meta or Mark Zuckerberg in any way, but certainly this line rings true. We need to control our own destiny and not get locked into a closed vendor. Developers and companies and even individuals, we don't want closed model providers to be able to change their model, alter their terms of service, or even stop serving them entirely. I, in the last few years, have decided to transfer some domains to Google domains. It'll be fine, I thought. Google is solid. I think within 2 months, I get an email saying, we're shutting it all down. Having been online and building stuff since 2011, I've seen stuff like this happen repeatedly where people would build a business on top of, say, Amazon or, Google SEO, or maybe on top of Facebook with Facebook ads or with a Facebook presence. And then that business would disappear overnight in a blink of an eye, gone. Oftentimes through no fault of their own. It's just the platform, the behemoth that was the thing that they were building on, decided to go a different way. So this is a big, big deal. You don't want to be building somewhere where somebody could push a button and erase everything you've built. Open source protects you from a lot of that. Certainly, they need to protect data. There's certain data that you just don't want to be sending over APIs, over the cloud. Like Mark said, they're not necessarily bad at their job, but sometimes you need to have everything in-house. The other big thing is cost. Imagine you have a business and you're using a team of agents to help you run it. Customer service, sales, tracking, package delivery, etc. Now, these numbers might be outdated, but I think the point still stands that running on Anthropic would cost $75,000 per month for a certain amount of outputs. That $75,000 per month is only $30,000 on OpenAI, but it's $800 on Llama 3 running on Grok. So $30,000 a month expense versus $800 if you're running it on open source with Grok, or potentially even cheaper if you're able to run it on your own hardware. Now, those numbers are outdated, so that's not the right numbers, but the point still stands. Open source can be much, much cheaper. We're talking orders of magnitude cheaper. They want to invest in the ecosystem that's going to be the standard for the long term. That's that rolling snowball, picking up more and more snow, getting bigger and faster and stronger. If they're able to execute this and get it to some critical mass, it's unlikely that they'll ever be unseated short of them dropping the ball or some sort of a government intervention. Now, why is it good for Meta? Well, they come out and say it, hey, we're not selling cloud services. We're not a cloud service provider, right? They're selling access to AI isn't our business model. That means that openly releasing Llama doesn't undercut our revenue, sustainability, or ability to invest in research like it does for closed providers. This is important. And they actually say this. This is one of the reasons several closed providers consistently lobby governments against open source. As I've heard it described by somebody online, I can't verify if this is true or not, but it seems like somebody that's close to Congress and kind of know how things shake out. So a lot of the tech companies, they send their representative, their lobbyists over there to help the people making decisions, the lawmakers, to understand this technology. Unfortunately, we don't really have something that educates them. There's no course on this that can kind of catch you up to speed to help you understand where this thing's going. So these experts get sent over there. They do their best to explain everything, but maybe push in a certain way. Like they'll say, oh, well, open source, if we allow that to happen, well, it'll just kill everybody. It's very dangerous, or something to that effect. Now, whether they believe it or not, maybe they're being sincere, who knows, but it is very much against their interest to have open source. Because, if you flip the statement, what Mark is saying here is that him releasing Llama, it does undercut their revenue. The people that sell AI, the tech providers, right? It endangers their sustainability, and it takes away from their ability to invest in research, right? Because their revenue, their cash flow, that's what they need to invest in more research. Meta's cash flow is not determined on how cheap or expensive AI is, how profitable it is to sell it. And then he talks about why it's good for the world, why it's good for everyone's productivity, creativity, and quality of life, to accelerate economic growth, to unlock progress in medical and scientific research. We're seeing massive applications of AI in the medical space. There's a million things out there that could not only unlock medical research, let's say, but just help nurses and doctors be more effective, see more patients, something that can audit things, catch mistakes, etc. This can bring costs for medical services down across the world. We've seen some projects where various AI applications were sent to places in the world where it's hard to get quality medical service, to get access to doctors. AI helps you get some sort of help, some sort of knowledge, maybe some sort of a diagnosis. It helps those people get it at scale for not a lot of money, very cheaply. Open source will ensure that more people around the world have access to the benefits and opportunities of AI, that the power isn't concentrated in the hands of a small number of companies. So, at the risk of stating the obvious, this looks big, really big, and I think we're going to see some pretty insane innovation that's going to emerge out of this, and very quickly. Make sure you're subscribed. We're going to be covering a lot of this, and I'll be showing you how to use this for yourself, for your own needs. We have just entered an era where powerful AI models are available to use for all. They're inexpensive, they're fast. Using something like Llama 3.5 with Grok will allow lightning speed access to these models on your own terms, very inexpensively. And I think we're going to really see what the reality of open source dangers are, right? So if there's a lot of dangers, they're going to start coming out right now. We're going to see how people can abuse this, how people can use it for good. And the conversation won't be so much just theory anymore. Moving forward, we'll have a better idea of how valuable this is, how dangerous this is. For me personally, if I had to guess, I would say that more and more people realize that this is the way to go, that open source is the way to go. With that said, my name is Wes Roth, and thank you for watching.